It's the Lime Podcast. Jen Gerson off this week. Andrew Potter steps in as guest co-host. A federal update, including what the hell the Liberals and Conservatives are doing, why Canadian provinces can't seem to get anything done, and then whether or not our phones have destroyed the kids and society at large. All that and more on this episode of the Lime Podcast. This episode of the Lime Podcast has been brought to you by Unsmoke Canada, which is dedicated to helping Canadians who are looking to quit smoking understand the full range of options available. Despite decades of government programs and increasing regulations, today, nearly 4 million Canadians still smoke cigarettes. Adult smokers who choose to continue to smoke should be aware that other options exist. While not risk-free, alternatives such as heated tobacco, vaping products, and oral smokeless products provide a potentially less harmful choice. Smoke-free alternatives do not involve combustion or burning, like smoking a cigarette does. Instead of heavily restricting access and information about these options, Canada's government should be adopting common-sense legislation that will help further bring down Canada's smoking rates and put information in the hands of Canadians. Information such as the relative risks compared to cigarettes. Because the products are not the same, and they shouldn't be treated the same. It's just common sense. Learn more about how a smoke-free future can be achieved at Unsmoke.ca. Hey everybody, it's Matt Gurney. This episode of the Lime Podcast recorded August the 8th, 2025. Jen is on vacation this week. Andrew Potter, author, columnist, professor at McGill, and a member of the Line team, steps in as co-host to fill in for Jen. Otherwise, it would just be me staring at a camera for an hour and a half, and who needs that? A lot of interesting topics we're going to cover. We're going to do a bit of a federal update that's going to bounce a little bit off of what Jen and I were talking about last week, because there's been some interesting stuff that has happened, and there's also been some interesting stuff that hasn't happened in the week since our last episode. Then we're going to take a look at the provinces. Normally, the Line Podcast gives you the view from Ontario and Alberta, because that's where your hosts are. We're going to change that up a little bit this week, just because of the geography of it. It's a little bit of an update from Quebec, including where a new survey is saying really interesting things about the kids wanting to separate. And speaking of the kids, there is a new survey coming out of the United States looking at American kids and adults and older adults, boomers. And oh my God, this is a self-reported survey that is coming up with some really interesting conclusions. We've got a problem here, folks. Lots to talk about. This is the Line Podcast. Well, here we have the wonderful Andrew Potter of the Line and of McGill joining us here, filling in for Jen Gerson, who's on vacation this week. And something Jen and I were talking about this last week, Andrew, which was how little news was happening out there. And there's always news. There's stuff happening in the Middle East. There's stuff happening in Asia. There's stuff happening in Europe. But we're trying to figure out what news our listeners and viewers care about, which is not always the same. But there were some interesting developments on the political front this week. I'll yield the floor to you for a minute, because we talked about doing a little bit of a federal update, and you said you wanted to riff a bit off the column that I'd written last week about Carney's 100 days compared to FDR's 100 days. So we'll talk politics generally in a minute, but why don't you just take the wheel? What were you thinking of saying?
Yeah, sure. So it's funny, when I read your column, I kind of thought maybe you're being a bit hard on the guy, right? It's early days and so on. But there's been a number of sort of like bullet points on that narrative that have sort of come out in the last week since you wrote the column that maybe sort of rethink, maybe you're onto something. One was I don't know if you saw it. Paul Wells has a piece in the Walrus basically saying, look, Trump's winning the trade war. And saying like we're not getting absolutely destroyed, right? But Trump seriously has the wind in his sails and is making us react more than we'd like to be. Another was Pierre Poilievre has come out of the woodwork out of cut short a summer vacation to put out a video and talk about a plan for the fall about the Sovereignty Act or whatever he wants to call it, right? The sovereignty agenda about repealing a number of bills and so on, and sort of getting Canada back on track. And a lot of what he has suggested there, I don't really disagree with. It's the question is simply this, or the proposal is simply this. It jumps off from your column, which is the Carney government showing the sense of urgency and obsession, single-minded obsession with building Canada that they said they did, and they were elected to follow through on. And you can say all the things you want. It's summer, Parliament's not sitting. They're dealing with Trump and so on, right? But I'm not quite seeing that sense of righteous urgency that I think we need, to be honest.
There's a new Naked Gun movie that's out. Like a legacy sequel is the Hollywood term for these things. But I'm bringing it up because I'm thinking of the original Naked Gun, which has one of the funniest lines of any movie I can think of because it so perfectly describes corporate life. Leslie Nielsen is comforting the wife of the O.J. Simpson character because O.J. Simpson, who plays a cop, has been shot by a bad guy and he's in the hospital. And Leslie Nielsen says to the grieving, the terrified wife, "Not one man on this force will rest for 1 minute until the bad guys that did this are behind bars. Now let's go get a bite to eat."
Right, let's get a bite to eat. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And that describes a lot. Like you and I have both worked for big corporations. That's a lot of corporate life. Like I had this great boss once who at like a quarterly meeting was going on and on about how this company had to commit itself to relentless change. And I knew for a fact that this guy was sitting on an approved hiring order for a vitally needed position and had been sitting on his desk for about 2 months and he just hadn't gotten to it yet. Right. So I love being told about relentless change agendas by guys who can't sign their documents. But yeah, you say like maybe I was being too hard on Carney. I know I might be. I'm not passing final judgment here, but I'm looking around and I'm thinking, how hard is it to get the ball rolling? And maybe it's really hard. Maybe the problem we're looking at, man, is that this is all the getting the snowball moving part. And once it goes, it'll move. Yeah. But just maybe it isn't. And how much credit am I supposed to give a cabinet that is half the guys who are okay with the pace of things under the last guy?
Yeah, exactly. And this is where I'm at. And it's one of these, I could be pushing either direction on this, right? Michael Sabia has been in the job for 1 month as clerk of the Privy Council. He's not turning the Titanic. He's pushing a massive boulder up the, pick whatever metaphor you want, right? I mean, he's got a lot, right? And nothing is going to happen in a month, not certainly not in the month of in the middle of the summer, right? On that front, and who knows just how much bandwidth the Trump negotiations are taking up, right? I mean, those guys are flying down there constantly. Champagne's flying and LeBlanc's flying and Nan's flying around, right? For me, it's less seeing motion than it is seeing narrative, and I need someone to tell me, frankly, every 48 hours that this country needs fixing, and that we're here to fix it, and we're not going to rest until we're done, right? And I need to hear it, and I need to see it, and I'm not hearing it, and I'm not seeing it, and so we're left guessing, assuming there's stuff happening in the backgrounds, but then stuff starts to leak out a bit, right? You see, and if you saw the report about Canada, or the report from the Department of Defense saying, we recommend keeping the F-35, right? Not making and one answer to that, one response to that is, of course you should keep the F-35. Going to a two-plane fleet would be bad in a million different ways. Another is that they're getting yes ministered. Right, that they're totally getting, here's our advice, and if you don't like that, well, here's the same advice in a different format, and if you don't like that, well, we'll cancel the snowbirds, right? And so, I guess I'm kind of waiting for one thing. I'm waiting for, and you're seeing it from the premiers as well, right? Alberta's getting the was saying Rick Bell has a column in Alberta this week saying, we can't wait forever. We need to see some motion on something needs to get approved. Something needs to get done. And if you're waiting for the next ministers meeting, next first ministers meeting to sort of talk about it some more, that's not good enough, right? Enough chat. So I could go either way, but I need something. I need something to grab onto so that I know that Carney's government is not, like you said, just the same old people who were happy enough watching Justin Trudeau show off the socks on the world stage while the country sort of flatlined.
And it's funny because with Justin Trudeau, there is precedent for this kind of action because I get that it's summer. Like I really do. Like at the line, we've dropped one publication day a week. Jen's on holiday this week. Like everybody needs a rest in the summer. I get it. But I'm looking at Carney and I'm thinking the entire narrative of the Carney campaign was that the world had changed in a way that put Canada under existential threat of surviving as a sovereign country.
Yeah.
And 5 years ago, it got annoying eventually, but I do think something I do give the former Prime Minister Trudeau credit for was that the messaging from the federal government was actually really good. And I think Trudeau sort of understood, I'll be out in front of the public often. I will communicate about it daily, that we will reiterate, this is the situation we face. Here are the things we're doing. And I think it got to the point where it wasn't necessary anymore. And he kept doing it because he liked doing it. And I think like it had a shelf life, but I think at first it was the right thing to do. And then I'm not sure what it was like in Quebec, where you're in Montreal, but where I was in Toronto, Doug Ford was doing press conferences almost every day. Here's the latest information. Here's the emergency orders. People in this area, like there's a big outbreak there. Stay home, be safe. What have we seen from Mark Carney in like public messaging this summer? Almost nothing. Almost nothing. He's been a couple of scrums, couple of meetings. He just had a meeting with some Indigenous leadership this week about getting big projects built. So it's not zero, but it's almost nothing. And what I just find remarkable, and it sounds petty to say this, I know this, but there were people who 3 or 4 months ago were screaming about elbows up, gotta save the country. We're in existential danger, are now the exact same people who are saying, come on, it's only been 3 months.
Yeah.
I don't know what to make of that.
Yeah, I don't either. I'm still quite pro Carney, I think overall. I'm mostly happy that he's prime minister. But there's too many data points coming out about, I'm seeing, you see stories come out where people are saying, well, it turns out that breaking yourself free of the U.S. Trade is harder than it looks, right? Okay, yeah. Of course it's harder than it looks. We've been trying to do it for a very long time, right? But that's why we do these things not because they're easy, but because they're hard, right? Like, are we at war here or not? And if this is effectively a wartime footing, which I think it is, then I think we need some. You probably saw this too. I mean, D&D signed a deal for some drones to be for their ships to be delivered in 2032.
Yep,
2032. Right. Ukraine would have those built by Monday morning. Right. Like, guys, what's coming out is not matching the rhetoric, and at some point, that has to meet, and whether it meets back in the old Canada where things take 10 years to buy a pistol and 30 years to not approve a rail line, right? Or is this the new world order where it's elbows up or forget elbows up. Everyone hates that term. That's fine. I don't care. But call it what it is, right? Donald Trump has repeatedly threatened to annex the country. I don't want that to happen. I need a government that makes it clear that's not going to happen. And it begins with, as Pierre Poliver said, some kind of sense where the legislation and the policies and the regulations have to be single-mindedly pursued towards sovereignty, defending, protecting, and ensuring our sovereignty. That's growth, it's defense, it's security.
I'll come back to Polyev in a minute because I want to talk about that in particular, but I want to throw an idea at you on the Carney front before we can move on from Carney. You had said something a minute ago where there's a lot of data points coming out that are worrying. I want to flip that a little bit. One of the reasons I think I'm worried is because there's almost no data points. And you're not wrong. Like there have been a series of like anecdotal things, but in terms of Mark Carney's elected. Mark Carney appoints a cabinet. Mark Carney hires a chief of staff. Mark Carney hires, you've already mentioned, Michael Sabia to go run the PCO. And you're like, okay, here it comes. Nothing. There has just been nothing. So, and this is sort of what I was writing in the column last week. I acknowledge the possibility that starting Monday, it's going to be a tsunami of announcements and executive orders. Like, I get it. That is very, very possible. And if that happens, I will write that column. I will go, here it is. Here it was. And then we can judge them on the merits. But I kind of feel like you got to be cautious with your Second World War illusions. But like, is this a phony war?
Yeah.
Like, is this like Germany and France are like marching troops back and forth across the border with loudspeakers broadcasting propaganda to each other, but nothing is happening? Because we all remember how that ended.
Yeah.
Or is this just Canadian bureaucratic inertia at work here? You had said something a few minutes ago, Andrew, where you had said you're looking for something. I am too. And I don't even mean that in the sense of like emotional reassurance. I just want to see something, a strong data point where either the government announces a proposal and succeeds or announces a proposal and fails that will give me some kind of like directional sense of where this government's going. Because right now I don't have it.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. That's where I'm at. And I need, yeah, something's gotta happen soon.
One, you had mentioned Polyev a minute ago, because let's talk about urgency, right? Because we are beating up on the prime minister a bit for lack of urgency. Oh no, not beating up. We're encouraging. We're offering encouragement.
Yeah.
We would like to see more. This week, Polyev did release that video, kind of like a plan for Canada, and another story this week. And I don't want to obsess about internal Conservative Party bickering, like I honestly don't. But this week on a podcast, Jenny Byrne sort of for the first time substantively commented on her political future. Jenny Byrne was Pierre Poilievre's campaign manager and chief of staff for years, or top advisor, whatever her title was. And she took a lot of criticism during the campaign, some of it from the line about a campaign that did not pivot, where, you know, they were still talking about the carbon tax 2 weeks into it, whereas Carney was, I will defend the country. So Byrne, for people who haven't seen the podcast, and we won't dwell on this, basically said, nah, I'm done. I'll still be a senior advisor, but I'm not going to be in the same role again. And I honestly didn't know if that was a belated concession to angry conservatives, if Byrne got fed up and quit. Like, I have no idea. But what just jumped out at me here is we're talking about Carney needing some time to get his act together. The Conservatives are basically on the same schedule. We haven't heard much from Polyev other than the Stampede speech in months. And we only found out what Byrne's up to like 13 weeks after the election.
Yeah, it's a bit odd. I thought we would see more out of the Conservatives. I guess. I mean, look, Pierre's got to get his seat. I think the pre-polls open this weekend, I believe, or if they haven't opened already.
I think they just opened. Yeah,
just opened
when
right?
we're recording this.
So he'll be in Parliament soon. And probably be back soon. I mean, look, Pierre's at his best in Parliament. For better and for worse, right? It's where his best, but also his worst traits are sort of fully on display. But I think the sort of sense of disconnect and last. I think the Conservatives are trying to figure out whether Pierre's the guy, right? Whether he's the guy, and I don't think they know. And I don't think that's great. I think. I liked after the election, there was a sense out of the Conservatives that, okay, we lost the election, not great, but we're actually aligned to a certain extent with Carney on a lot of things. And if you're actually going to do things that conservatives like, we're going to back you on it, right? You're gonna punch a pipeline through to BC Coast, great, right? If you're gonna restart Energy East, great. If you're gonna repeal the Online News Act, all these kind of things. These would be all kinds of great things. Um, what kind of I'm worried about is that the lack of cohesion and strategic direction in the Conservatives is making the Liberals more complacent, right? Like they're just like, oh yeah, we basically have a majority government. The Tories know what they're doing. Pierre's not going to be around, so let's just let's go back and do a bunch of things. So that's what I'm worried about. I liked the Conservative Party that was basically saying we will back you if you're doing things that are good for the country, and if you don't, we'll hold your feet to the fire. I don't see them doing either of those things, right?
Yeah, and what I think has happened in after the election, I left my conservative friends alone. Like I was like, ooh, you know what? I'm not going to give these guys a call right now. I'm going to let them decompress. But I have spoken over the last month or two. Yeah, it was summer. People take trips. People go to the cottage. People do whatever they need to do to get their head right. What I'm thinking, and you said they don't know if they want to keep Polyev, and I think that's true. But I also think they have no theory to explain what just happened.
Right.
And I remember this is a local reference for me, but I remember after Doug Ford won his first provincial government, and it was a thumping, like the Liberals were reduced to like nothing. The Liberals basically spent 4 years telling themselves it was a fluke, where it was, well, we had an election at a really unpopular moment. Doug Ford's pretty good, populist dude. People like him. Lightning struck, but we'll be back. And then they had another election and Doug Ford won even bigger.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, all these provincial Liberals I've been talking to in Ontario had no idea what just happened to them. Like they weren't even upset about it. They were just shocked. I think a lot of Conservatives are kind of in that place because like I was talking to one guy and he was like, I get up in the morning and I think to myself, we won 41% of the vote and lost. And they don't know what to do with that yet. So I can almost in a weird way understand why they've been wandering around in a daze. But to your point, the purpose of the opposition is to oppose. That's part of how government works, and they're just not doing it.
Yeah.
And there are costs to this. And there was something you had actually flagged for me because you're in Montreal. You had flagged a La Presse article that was, and then before we did this, I went and I read it. There has been a massive surge in support for separatism among young Quebecers. Now, separatism in general is still in a minority position. So it's not like Quebec has lurched to be pro-sovereignty, but young voters, 18 to 35, are now decisively pro-sovereignty. And the reason is because they don't think Ottawa can address the problems. And I'm thinking of like that's the through line of everything we're talking about here. The Liberals, I don't know that we're not hearing from them. The Conservatives, we're not hearing from them. Young voters who in this country, as you and I know, they're angry. In Quebec, there's a place for that resentment to flow.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I think I was really surprised. I mean, it popped into my inbox this morning, and I started reading it. I thought because it actually speaks that survey. It's a crop poll. Sort of goes against the grain of the narrative that's come out since the Trump thing, which is Legault in particular. I mean, Legault was one of the first premiers out of the gate against Trump. When Trump started talking about Legault wrote a piece, I think in the Wall Street Journal, no, the American Hill, right?
Yeah.
Basically saying Canada's never going to become your 51st state. We're an independent country. You're a businessman. I'm a businessman. Let's do a good deal, right? It was a really, it was Legault at his best. I got a lot of problems with Legault, but it was Legault at his absolute best, right? And there was this general sense amongst Quebecers, right, that a recognition that for all their resentment against Ottawa and the rest of Canada and so on, a recognition that goes back to Etienne Taché saying that the last cannon fired in defense of North America will be fired by a French Canadian, right? This recognition that the British Crown, for better or for worse, is the best defense of the French fact in North America, right?
Yeah.
I think what happened in the election, if you the Conservatives want to know what happened in the election, the muscle memory of the old alliance of 1812 just kicked in, right? It was just the Quebec nationalists, the British loyalists, and Indigenous peoples just sort of got together and said, "No, Yankee, go home," right?
Yeah.
Um, and Conservatives need to sort of get their heads around that. That's the old muscle memory of of the Canadian nation. But now you've got this thing where young Quebecers are looking, they're saying, well, you know what? Yeah, you're right. Fuck, America can get stuffed, but it's the Quebec state that's gonna solve our problems, right? And if Ottawa doesn't start doing things that make it clear that they're not just the best defenders of the French fact, but the best groups suited to advancing the very real interests of young people in this country, and in
Hmm.
particular in Quebec, they've got a problem on their hands, right? And it just goes back to, and these problems are not um, identity problems. Where's my house? Where's my doctor? Right?
Hmm.
Why does everything so freaking expensive? Right? It's real meat and potato stuff. I need to dig into the poll a bit more. I haven't gone through the whole thing, but I suspect that's what it is. It's not about identity. The identity issue in Quebec is settled. Legault's seen to that.
The it was interesting reading it this morning because I had a completely random anecdotal man on the street encounter last night where a buddy of mine went out for a beer, and for whatever reason the bar was dead that night, and basically we ended up having like our own personal server because she had like no other tables in her section, and she was a really nice young woman, and we were just kind of talking with her, right, because she had nothing to do, and we were just chatting with her like, hey, like, where do you go to school, and things like that. And one of the things that just came out naturally in the conversation, and I'm not accusing her of any misbehavior. She was great. But oh my God, was she angry? Like there is like this rage in young voters. And we've talked about this before where we had said, hey, like, why is it so dead here tonight? And she's like, well, we actually had an unusually big like lunchtime crowd today. It's nice weather. So probably a lot of people came in when they're out for a walk. And I'm like, and she was like, there was actually a really old crowd today, a lot of retirees. And I'm like, oh, where do the retirees come from? And she just gestured around and she goes, they all live in all the homes they've owned for 50 years in this neighborhood and that they bought for $100,000 that are now worth 3.7 million.
Right.
And I'm in my shoebox, a 40-minute subway ride away. But these retirees are just, they hit their line of credit and they come to the bar. And I thought it was such like, she's probably exactly right.
Yeah.
Like, I don't think that was wrong. But what a weird comment to have pop out in the middle of a, hey, where are you from conversation, right? Like you ask like, hey, are you in school? How long have you been tending bar here? And it immediately goes to the boomers won't sell their homes, those bastards.
Right.
And I'm looking at this Quebec number and I'm looking at obviously what's happening in Alberta. Even you could say our federal politics, all these young voters suddenly stampeding to conservatives. The young voters are looking for a place to put that energy.
Yeah.
When they run out of places to put it, I don't know what happens.
Yeah. No, I agree. I think I agree entirely. And yeah, I don't know what happens.
Well, nothing to worry about, I'm sure.
Yeah, that's right.
We're going to take a quick break. When we come back in a minute, we're actually going to talk a little bit more about the provincial side of this. We're going to bounce off the Quebec thing. We're going to talk a bit more local politics because a couple of interesting stories we're going to sink our teeth into. So stick around. It's the Line Podcast. Go to www.readtheline.ca. Andrew Potter in this week for Jen Gerson, who's on holiday. We'll be right back. For hundreds of communities across Canada, forestry is a lifeline, supporting 200,000 workers, $87 billion in annual revenues, and $37 billion in exports, $29 billion to the United States. But it's more than just a driver of our economy. It's key to addressing some of our biggest challenges. We need an action plan for our forest sector and its employees, one that will help build the homes we need with Canadian wood, reduce the risk of wildfires, and create more family-supporting jobs right here at home. To learn more about what forestry can do for Canada, visit forestryforthefuture.ca. So, I was saying to you just a minute ago, Andrew, we were talking about Quebec, and there's this new poll that shows that separatism has really spiked among the young. And we were also beating up on the feds, the liberals and the conservatives for basically spinning their wheels and getting nothing done. I want to throw an idea at you, and it's a vibe, but I'm just throwing this at you. I don't think it's just a federal problem. And I was thinking that this week because there was this hilarious story. I know that I don't want to bore the listeners with this because this is hyper local news, but I live like a frisbee toss away from the future Eglinton Crosstown, which is sort of like a new rail mass transit line through Toronto. And it's going to be like I'm going to have a station that's like a 7-minute walk from my house. It's perfect for me. But the thing is just in perpetual delay hell. And there was this incredible story this week that made me laugh. The crosstown is now so late that the fleet of vehicles that were purchased for it are old. And they're actually running into maintenance problems on a line that hasn't even opened yet because of how old the rolling stock is. And at a press conference this week, Doug Ford, instead of talking about that, wanted to talk about his plan to dig a tunnel under the 401. And I'm looking at this, and I shouldn't make fun of Quebec sovereignty. That bites me in the ass every time I do that. But I kind of understand why the young voters of Quebec are like, you know what, fuck it, let's just get out. Like if I could have like an Ontario separatism movement to separate Ontario from Ontario, I would sign up for it at this point. Do we just live in an era where the states can no longer do things and the politicians just make shit up?
Yeah, I mean, we've talked about this. You've written about it. I've written about it. The crisis of state capacity that came out of the pandemic is a long-standing feature. What's interesting is for me is how everyone can recognize a problem, but still not be able to solve it, right? I think this is like one of the great questions of governance. I'll tell a quick story about my summer vacation. So we took the family out west, went to BC, BC Interior, spent some time in Golden, and then in Revelstoke, hiking in the mountains. And I got to tell you, cleanse your soul, right? If you can do it, go do it. But one of the things we did in Revelstoke was it was a rainy day. We went to the Revelstoke Railway Museum. Which if I could send every Canadian a ticket to the Revelstoke Railway Museum, I would, because Revelstoke is in the temperate rainforest, right? It snows. It's like if you ski, you know Revelstoke, right? But it's also kind of where Canada came together. Right, go 40 miles down the Trans-Canada one way, you get to Craigellachie, right, where the last spike was driven in. You go 40 miles the other way, you hit Rogers Pass, and Rogers Pass is like incredible, right? Not just the views and so on, but you sort of look at Rogers Pass and you just realize, what it took to sort of drive a railway, through there to meet the railway coming out of Kicking Horse. And at the museum, they've got this amazing display of these scale models of the railway trestles that were built, the bridges, the Mountain Creek, Stony Creek, and so on. Stony Creek was the highest timber bridge in the world when it was built. It was built in 7 weeks. Right. I read that. I was like, I had to read it 3 times. Right. 7 weeks. Right. They built it. Yeah. And yeah, they cut corners. And yes, there were hardships and workers were killed in avalanches and there were Chinese workers and so on. Right. There's a dark side to that story, which the Railway Museum does a good job of telling you. Right. But it also is a story of state capacity, of drive, ambition, ingenuity, and accomplishment, right? And it's one of those things where you just and then you go and you get in a rail car from like the 1930s. It's like a dining car and it's glorious, right? It looks like something out of a James Bond movie, and you just think it was a better time, right? Like you just, and I know it's all nostalgia, I know it's all bullshit, right? But it just seems like what a better time that was, and I don't know what to make of it other than to think, if there was some way of rekindling that sense of drive and ambition, that Canada was a country that was built and a country that needs to continue to be built and renewed and reimagined. If there was a way of doing that, I would get behind that in 2 seconds, because I don't know. I read the stories, right? Like when you just told about this, like these things get in the Eglinton, what's it called?
The Crosstown.
The Crosstown, yeah. Eglinton, right? I read the same stories about the Ottawa LRT, which is like comically bad, right? And it's just like, what are we doing? Like, what is the problem here? What am I missing?
I have a friend who is 2 things, and this is going to sound totally unrelated, but it'll make sense in a minute. He's gay and he's a railway buff. And he had this incredible line to me once where he said, on the one hand, I'm very glad to live in an era where I can love freely and marry the man I love. On the other hand, my God, the trains were better 100 years ago. And he says, I'm kind of torn because I
Yeah.
don't want to go back in time to when I would have had to be in the closet. But wow, I would have loved to have gone on one of those trains.
Yeah.
And there is not far from my cottage. There's a small town that has a swing bridge, and it's a one-lane bridge, and it goes over the lock system. And if there's a particularly tall boat, they just swing the bridge out of the way. The boat goes by, then the bridge swings back. And a few years ago, I don't even think they had to replace the bridge. They had to like replace the gear mechanism or something that swung the bridge, and it ended up taking longer than it took to build the Golden Gate Bridge.
Right.
And this was something that was being tracked by one of the local Facebook pages, where it was basically like date of construction beginning on the Golden Gate Bridge to the first car driving from San Francisco to, I think it was to the Marin Peninsula, was like X number of days. And repairing the gearbox in the swing bridge in Cottage Country, Ontario took, and ultimately it wasn't even close. Like the gearbox in Ontario ended up taking much longer than that. And I know that there are versions of this everywhere. So, like when you said a minute ago, we were talking about Quebec. I just want to ask you, like, in general, as a guy living in Quebec, is the Quebec government competent? Like, do provincial services run well in Quebec? There's all these young voters going like, Ottawa will not fix our problems. Will Quebec?
No, no. I mean, the problems here are legion, right? The healthcare system's a mess, and I mean, Montreal is a beautiful city. I love living in it, but the construction situation is awful. Right? The city is literally drowning in traffic cones, right? And they're falling behind, and so on. I mean, I think one of the great scandals, and I don't know if this is a provincial or a federal responsibility. I could probably check in on it, right? But to get off island to Montreal and drive to Ottawa, you have to cross the Isle of Torque Bridge. Um, since I started driving to Montreal from Ottawa when I was living in Ottawa in 2006 or 2007 to see my girlfriend, who's now my wife, who was living in Montreal at the time, the Isle of Torque Bridge has been down to 2 or 3 lanes because of construction, like close to 20 years now. And about a year ago, engineers discovered that the bridge was in worse shape than they thought, so it went down to 1 lane in either direction. And while they're trying to rebuild the replacement bridge, right? The bridge can't be fixed; it has to be replaced. So it's down to 1 lane in either direction. Now they've opened it up to 2. They should short it up in certain places. If you live off island, you can take 45 minutes to an hour just to get onto the Montreal Island if you live in Vaudreuil or one of these places, right? This is the main connection between the country's second largest city and the capital, right? Is a falling down 2 lane bridge. It's a scandal. It's a scandal.
There was something, and I don't remember if we talked about it in the first segment or if we were kicking it around off the air before we hit record today. But you'd mentioned, and so apologies to the listeners and viewers if I'm repeating myself here, but Paul Wells has written a piece in The Walrus, and there was also another piece just a few days ago. It was an essay published by CNN. I didn't know CNN did that, but it got flagged to me, and I ended up reading it, where it basically says Trump is winning the trade war.
Yeah.
And the reason I bring this up now is because I think people know that I'm no fan of Trump, but he is unleashing the force of American government to accomplish certain objectives. I don't like the objectives, but he is using government as a tool. Whereas I think Canadians and federal, provincial, municipal, they're using government as an excuse or as a diversion. You mentioned so I don't have anything in Toronto that's comparable to the bridge. I mean, the Gardiner is kind of an omni clusterfuck, and it always has been. But one of the things I've just noticed about Toronto in general, after I was at the bar last night and having my waitress tell me about boomers and their real estate, I just walked home. Like it was a perfect night in Toronto. It was like 22 degrees and clear. I thought, screw it, I'm not going to take the bus. I'll walk home. It was a 45-minute walk. The roads are third world.
Yeah.
Major arterial roads, secondary roads, they're completely third world. Yeah. And I didn't have any public safety issues or anything like that. No homeless, nothing like that. It was a smooth walk home. But I could have rolled my ankle 3 times just in the state of the roads. There's I was shocked a few weeks ago not to destroy my tire in a pothole that was not marked on a major road in Toronto. It was just, bam, like it startled me in the car how hard I hit this thing. But you talk about it being a scandal, and it isn't. Like it
Yeah.
should be, but it isn't. I'm wondering, instead of having new separatism movements pop up or convoys and stuff, like, do we just need one political party? I don't even care which one at this point to get seized and turned into like an actual competence party.
Yeah. I mean, look, that was the interestingly, Doug Ford has shown gusts in that direction. I just don't know whether he has the capacity to do it internally, but also whether he's more just blessed than anything. It's hard for me to know. I don't live in the province, so I don't follow it. But I mean, I think a friend of mine has this interesting take on it's a line he likes to use about institutions in general. He used to talk about it his undergrads, but he uses it in institutions in general. He says they're like fields of wheat, right? And he's from Saskatchewan. So he says, if you're looking at a field of wheat, if there's no wind blowing or if it's just sort of like a calm day or there's a bit of a breeze, the wheat just kind of like goes back and forth. It kind of like the stalks of wheat just sort of move in any old direction, right? There's no shape or form to it. When the wind is blowing, the wheat all leans in the same direction, right? Everyone's pointing the same direction. But as soon as the wind stops, the wheat goes back to doing this, right? And he would say, my undergrads are like that, right? When I'm making an argument to them, right? They're all like, yes, 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 I follow your argument. And as soon as you stop making the argument, they go back to whatever views they had before, right? But I think it's like any large organization or dare I say federal system is the same way. Like the Canadian provinces are a field of wheat where if there is no strong direction from Ottawa, from the center, about what the country needs to do, they will just go in whatever direction they want, right? Whichever way the local winds are blowing. And Canada has operated this way for decades now without any strong direction from the federal government. And so the provinces have gotten used to just sort of blowing with whatever local winds happen to be going, right? Carney comes in and is like, no, there's a strong wind blowing from the US, right?
Mm-hmm.
And we all need to lean in the same direction, right? Pointing against that. The federal government's going to lead this, right? And I think we go back to our earlier conversation for the break. It's that there was unity and there was consistency and there was clarity, and then it stopped because for whatever reason, Carney stopped blowing in the direction that the country needs to go in. And they've all kind of found their own feet. You're starting to see David Eby saying there's no pipeline coming through BC, and Scott Moe is saying you need to drop the tariffs, and Ford saying no, you need more tariffs, right? It's a field of wheat on a calm day, and Canada needs to get a wind blowing, and this if it doesn't come from Ottawa, it's going to come from somewhere else, right? And that's my little metaphor for the weekend for everyone.
Fields
right?
of wheat.
Field of wheat.
Go full sting there. Fields of gold.
Yeah.
I think one of the things that worries me, and I have raised this with friends of mine who are politicians or retired civil service. Serving civil servants don't talk much. The retired ones suddenly become founts of wisdom.
Yeah.
Yeah. But one of the things, like one of my little theories, Potter, is I said that we need to reintroduce wolves to the ecosystem. Because I remember reading this story years ago where like some provincial or national park had been overrun by deer because there were no wolves, because all the wolves had been killed because they were bad for the tourists. So we had to like airdrop wolves into the park so that they would kill some of the deer and kind of restore balance. And I think we need to do that with like Canadian society. I think we actually need some predators back in the mix, because I think we've just kind of sanded all the rough edges off of everything where no one's ever to blame. No one faces consequences. The apparatus of the state, when they do investigations, will ultimately conclude that if there was anything that went wrong here, we can't prove it. Like, it's very rare. I was thinking about this the other day. When was the last time we had like a public inquiry report or anything like that? It doesn't have to be an inquiry. It could be something like that actually comes out and says, this specific thing failed because these specific people fucked up. We occasionally see that with auditors general. They will sometimes come out and go, here is a program that is broken for XYZ reasons. But even when that happens, what the provincial governments do is they release a report accepting the auditor's report. And that's it.
Yeah.
And then it just ends.
Yeah.
And in any corporate environment, to state the obvious, repeated failure will eventually result in consequence. Sometimes it might take longer than it should. Is Canada just like a post-consequence society?
Yeah, I hope not. I think we have been for a long time. I mean, there's no question. There's huge accountability issues at every level. I'm poking through Andrew Coyne's new book on the crisis of Canadian
Hmm.
democracy. It's what you'd expect, but he's not wrong, right? I mean, Coyne's pretty blunt about it, right? He kind of thinks that Canada is arguably not a democracy in any meaningful sense, for all of these reasons, right? But the fundamental one being there's just a complete absence of basic accountability.
Accountability.
There's no transparency. There's no insight. And there's no accountability. Um, yeah, it's look, Canada's got a lot of problems. We've been talking about them.
You were talking a minute ago about the I love the metaphor now, the fields of wheat,
It's
because
one of my favorite metaphors.
it's good. We're going to
Yeah,
use it. We'll make that a regular here. Really interesting because you talked about the premiers, right? Like, think of the Western provinces: BC, Alberta, Saskatchewan, Manitoba. In the last month or so, and I did an interview recently with Rob Shaw, who came on the line to talk with me about this. David Eby out in BC, he was out really hard and fast when Trump, like, basically, like, British Columbia was going to invade Washington State. Like,
yeah, yeah,
Eby
yeah.
was way out there. All of a sudden, he's like, well, hey, I'm not sure any more tariffs are going to do anything other than hurt BC businesses. And we're going to have to find a way to have a deal with the Americans. As you've said, Scott Moe is starting to get weary on tariffs. EB talking about pipelines. It was Wab Kinew who blinked on pipelines first because he had been 100% on board with like nation building until
Yeah.
he talked to his local stakeholders. And all of a sudden he's like, well, we can't do this through Manitoba. And I think in the absence of a strong wind blowing from Ottawa, and I'm torturing the metaphor a bit here, the winds will blow locally. Like,
Yeah.
if you don't have a strong center that is actually saying this is the direction we're going in, the premiers are going to go, well, you know what? I go to the Council of the Federation meeting once a year, but these guys are in the legislature watching me every friggin' day of the session. So I'm going to do what they want me to do. And you talked a little bit about Doug Ford, whether he's lucky or good. I don't know. I do live here and I still don't have an answer for that question. But one of the things that Doug Ford might have in common with a lot of the others is that Doug Ford will not do anything that imposes an actual political cost. He will
Yeah.
talk tough, but the moment he encounters like a whiff of resistance, he folds.
Yeah.
And I've been hard on Doug Ford for that, but I'm starting to wonder if he's kind of the representative Canadian politician.
Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting. Back in February or March, when the 51st state stuff was really at its peak, right?
Mm-hmm.
When Trump was really like just before the election, when he
Yeah,
was
tweeting about Governor Trudeau and
Governor
yeah.
Trudeau and not denying that he might invade, when the Greenland stuff was there, when he was really pushing this. I texted a friend of mine, a friend of ours, friend of the line, who has insight into this stuff. I said, we're fucked, aren't we? Just, hoping he would come back and say, no, no, no. Right. And he's like, pretty much. And I said, okay, so what does this look like? Right. Is it like Marines on Parliament Hill? Does it, what is it like, the American flag on the Peace Tower? Like, what does it look like? He said, no, it won't look like anything like that. It'll just mean our elections won't matter anymore. And we'll be a de facto vassal state. And I said, well, is that inevitable? He said, well, here's the problem. He said, we will talk a big talk, and he said this in like February or March. He said, we'll talk a big talk, and then all of the choke points, the veto points, and the special interests will assert themselves, and they will shut down any genuine attempt at changing the country.
Yeah.
And I am very, very worried he was right.
I don't know if he's right, but all the evidence to date does point that way. And I was
Yeah.
thinking about like Wab Kinew, the perfect example, because Jen and I were actually halfway ready to build a monument to the guy a few months ago because he was
100%.
he
He was Captain Canada.
but he also was like he was Captain Canada, but he was also like what he was saying was reasonable.
Yeah.
it was not insane. It was basically like, hey, like we've got challenges and here are some like sane things we can do to meet them. It wasn't Doug Ford showing up with a baseball cap or Danielle Smith flying to Florida to have dinner. It was something in the middle. It was like, hey, look, these are the problems we have. Here are the things we could do this. But then you're right. Then he talked to his own local special interest and was like, well, on second thought, we actually can't do any of those things.
Yeah.
And this is where kind of that first segment where we had before the break, where no communication other than the odd press scrum out of Carney, and Poilievre goes silent for months. This is bad.
Yeah.
This isn't good. And what I'm worried about, to your point of whether we can save ourselves, I don't know if the people in charge actually on a basic level understand the difference between talk and do.
Yeah, it's a good question. I think certainly they didn't under the Trudeau government. The talking was the doing.
Mm-hmm.
I suspect Carney and the people around him want to do something. I think. I mean, I think here's the basic thing. To govern is to choose, right? And to choose is to make enemies. Carney's has not yet decided who he needs to make an enemy of.
Well said. All right, we're going to come back in a minute. We're going to talk about a group of people who are having no problems making enemies, the young. And don't worry, it's not going to be another generational beating up session, but there's a fascinating new survey out of the United States that talks about generational attitudes. We're talking about that in a moment. This is the Line Podcast. Like and subscribe and visit us at readtheline.ca. This episode of the Line Podcast is also brought to you by Airbnb. It's no secret that Canada is in a housing crisis. Some think that short-term rentals, such as Airbnbs, are the problem. But the total amount of Airbnbs that could be converted into long-term homes accounts for only 0.6% of Canada's housing stock. In reality, Airbnbs play a key role in stimulating local economies across Canada, with Airbnb guests generating an estimated $10.8 billion in visitor spending. Learn more at airbnb.ca/closer look. So this is going to be a bit of a fun one, or maybe a little bit out of character for us, because it's something of a running joke here, unless you don't think it's a joke, that like Jen roughs up the boomers. She really loves going after boomers here. You and I are leaning a little bit in the opposite direction here. We're going after the kids. Not the children, but the young adults between 18 and 35, roughly. So you and I don't want to burn people, but I think we can just say that in our careers, we've both encountered what we could call politely a generational divide. And now there's a really fascinating survey coming out of the United States, the University of Southern California, I think it was, which does this annual survey of lots of Americans across a huge demographic slice. And they track like behavioral and attitudinal changes across multiple years. Young Americans are fundamentally different as creatures than the rest of us. So how do you want to get into this? Do you want to talk about your experiences or do you want to talk about the survey?
No, talk about the survey and then we can sort of chime in on anecdotes.
So the survey, what the hell was it called? The Understanding America survey, the UAS, was asking questions about what they define as conscientiousness. Basically, they define that as the ability to make a plan and be disciplined enough to stick to it. They also looked at other things like extroversion, self-identified neuroticism, which was basically sort of defined for the survey's purposes as being anxious to the point where you have a hard time functioning. And there were other things like social trust indicators and what was the other one? I'm blanking on it now. But there was
neuroticism,
social trust.
Extroversion.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, that's right. All of the metrics on this are in complete free fall. And for young Americans today identify themselves as highly, highly introverted. That's a complete flip. Every previous generation, the young, probably because their hormones are telling them to go out and find a mate and they don't have a lot of job responsibilities yet. Young people have always been the most social people. Modern Americans, it's completely flipped. The younger age group right now is the most introverted. They say they are highly distracted, highly neurotic, and have very low, and this is again self-identification. These young people are saying, I don't complete projects. I will start something and never finish it. And when I read this, and I'm not looking to pick a generational fight on a new frontier, that checked out to me. Just as a
Yeah.
guy who had experience managing and editing much younger people, they're smart, they're nice, they're more mature than us in some ways, I think. Like they've just been raised differently. But can they execute a project on a timeline? In my experience, no.
Yeah.
What the hell happened? Smartphones?
I think smartphones were the fuel, and the pandemic was the gasoline. That's my sort of take on it. It's not a novel one. There's people who challenge it, but I think that's effectively what happened. I mean, what was interesting about that survey, people can Google it, the FT has a good report on it, with some very handy charts, is that the extroversion numbers are actually the closest. Everyone is now more introverted than we used to be, right? And you see that there's this whole sort of TikTok internet meme thing about introversion. About how people text things like, I had plans to go out, and when a friend cancels, suddenly you're like, woohoo, right? Like, because they've canceled on you, so you don't have to cancel on them, right? Because the last thing anybody wants to do is actually go out, right? I mean, that's just simply not my experience of being 18 to 30, right? It was be out with my friends at all costs, at all personal, professional, financial costs. I must be out with my friends, right? And people don't want to do that anymore, right? There's this whole, at least, theme about not wanting to go out, wanting to stay in, wanting to just curl up, wanting to just curl up with your phone, most likely, right? Yeah, and I think it's and look, I was debating this with a friend this morning actually, and he was like, "Look, people complained about TV in our generation." And so, well, yeah, sure, of course they did, right? But these are self-reported metrics, right? They're measuring something, right? It's not measuring nothing. And so, what is it measuring and why is an important question, because I'll say this, that it tracks largely with my experience. So I teach at a university, and I teach 20 somethings and so on for the most part. And yeah, that tracks with not just how I perceive them, but their own self-reports, right? They report that they're more neurotic than frankly my generation was, and so on. And it's a problem. I mean, it's a problem for who? It's a problem certainly for professors and students who have to interact and understand one another and appreciate one another and so on, right? There's definitely a generational gap there and a generational divide that goes beyond just cultural. It's not just that I say Simpson things, Simpson references or Seinfeld references, and they're like, why are you talking to me about Archie Bunker, right? It's not like that, right? It's a more of an understanding of where you're coming from and what your needs are, and how you can be best motivated to present your work. And it's simply not good enough for professors now to say, "Oh, suck it up, do the work and whatever," because it's just there's a whole different understanding of their psychology and their motivations that needs to be wrangled. Otherwise, we're all going to be in big trouble.
So when you were talking there, not that you didn't have my total attention, but I actually pulled up the survey here, and you're right. The extroversion numbers have tanked, and basically almost every age group now identifies itself as introverted. Older age groups, between 40 and 59, which is a big band, but both of us are in that, are fairly introverted. The boomers, the over 60 and up is how it's defined. Again, it's a big band, only slightly more extroverted than we are. The kids, though, are way below us. They do seem to be rebounding a bit, which might be a post-pandemic effect. One of the other really interesting ones, though, was this category, which is called agreeableness, which basically is, for the survey's purposes, is designed as polite, friendly, things like that. And the older two age bands are showing post-COVID recovery, and the younger ones aren't. And I've said this before, and this is not like a nice part of my personality, but it's a confession, and I make it openly here. I have been less nice since COVID.
Yeah.
Where I had to, and I've talked very openly about this. Like, I was in a meeting once at my bank, and the woman I was dealing with was just completely like just rank incompetence. And I was getting so angry, I had to get up and leave because I didn't want to say something or do something I would regret. And I remember standing outside thinking to myself, this isn't like me.
Yeah.
Like, this is, and I think maybe these numbers are turning around a bit as the pandemic stress recedes here. But I do think, and it was Jen who wrote the column about like we're all crazy now.
Yeah.
I think we're all crazy now.
Yeah. I think one of the most interesting sociocultural shifts of, call it, the last 30 years, right? So, but more the last 15 is there was, for a long time, the internet was another place. There was real life, IRL, they used to call it, right? And then there was the internet. And there was real life values and internet values, and you could kind of keep them distinct and so on. Uh, and at a certain point, sometime in the last 10 years, the sort of what became base and superstructure of that sort of shifted. Whereas I think for a lot of people, online life is the base, like it's the foundation, and real life is sort of the superstructure that kind of like sort of floats above it and that you interact with when you're not online, right? As opposed to online being a place where you go when you're not in real life. It's the sort of the baseline normative dimension has flipped. And I think that's a big part of it, right? So now we're so used to being online, to being in real life, the real world, meat space, or whatever you want to call it, right? You sort of fit your online values into your real world experiences, and not the other way around, right? And so I find the same thing. I get ill tempered with people. I get short. My attention span gets short, and it's hard because online it's easy to be like that. It's normal to be like that. So that's sort of, I think, what has kind of happened. We've normalized online behavior in such a profound way. I mean, look, I don't know if you get them, but I've got this stupid thing on my phone where it sends me my screen usage, right? And
Uh huh.
it's insane.
Sobering.
It's insane. It is insane how much
Yeah.
time I spend looking at my phone, right? And I don't care. You can quote, oh, people are afraid of the radio and people are afraid of TV. I'm sorry. I never watched TV 7.5 hours a day. It didn't. I watched an hour a day. I spent 7.5 to 8 hours a day on my phone.
There's another, I didn't pull the stats on this, but there's another social indicator that is being tracked. And you and I both watch these things, so you'll know what I'm talking about here. The kind of what we could call milestone markers of adolescence or adulthood are happening later.
Yeah.
And there's a bunch of them, like the age you go on your first date, the age of your first sexual encounter, the age of losing virginity, the age of your first romantic relationship. These things have been pretty stable in sort of mid to late teens for generations. They're happening later.
Yeah.
And, it's this weird social moment where, in terms of openness to sexual diversity and in sexuality in general, we've probably never had a more permissive societal environment, and the kids just aren't doing it. And a couple of weeks ago, I was walking through the park at night on the way home from another pub visit, and I came across two teenagers who thought they had the park to themselves. And I sort of detoured around them. And I was thinking to myself, on the one hand, good for them. On the other hand, I was kind of surprised. You don't see that anymore. When I was a teenager, you had to step over the couples in the park.
Yeah.
And I have a son who's too young to be worrying about that stuff yet. But he has like a very good, close group of friends from school. And it's the summer. We're now halfway through the summer. I don't know if they've seen themselves in person all summer, but they've played multiplayer video games together every day.
Right.
That's social for them. They are like, their social batteries are full. They're not lonely. They're feeling great. And they haven't gotten together.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting. And I'm at the same space where, I mean, my son spends a lot of time. My son's 12. He spends a lot of time outside and with his friends and so on. But it really is at the point where, um, you know, I'm almost happy when he's talking to his friends online, because at least he's talking to his friends, right? Because like unlike me, I'm just staring at my phone like a freaking chump, right? At least it's social. It seems to be the minimal thing. It's such a weird thing. I mean, these numbers, and I mean, this survey is it reinforces what like this is not new, right? The stats you've got about social milestones not new. Stuff about kids not having sex, having trouble dating, and so on. This has been around for a while, and people have been sort of somewhat in denial about it, somewhat trying to figure out the reasons. Like there's the old Black Mirror thing, right? Just add cell phones and you can explain everything, right? Um, but it really is remarkable, and it's remarkable for me as a parent to sort of try and figure out how I can help my kids navigate this because like when we were kids, the big worry, or when we were teenagers, the big worry was our teenagers having sex, right? They shouldn't be having sex, right? Now it's like, why are you having sex? Like, and it's like,
Yeah.
how am I gonna how am I gonna live? How am I gonna guide my son, my daughter? I have no idea. Go have
Well,
sex.
yeah, please go slut it up out there and sleep
Go
around. Yeah,
go
no,
on
I
a
know.
date.
Like, please have a boyfriend. You're too old to not have a boyfriend. Like,
Yeah.
instead of being you're too old to have a boyfriend. And I do think the pandemic landed hardest on the youngest groups. I think that's undeniable. Like, my son was in the third grade before he had an uninterrupted year of school. Kindergarten, grade one, and grade two were either canceled or thoroughly disrupted. And I don't know what the long term effect of that's going to be. But it's interesting because you talk about these not being new trends here. Looking at the charts, 2020 is an inflection point on some of these things. It's not on others.
No.
And on the neuroticism one in particular, I think is interesting, right? Because the younger generation is showing declining mental health. The older generations, including ours, showed like a very brief minor pandemic era dip and then sort of a return to baseline. The older generation showed no effect at all. And I think in theory, it's good that we talk openly about mental health struggles. I have friends who are very open about the fact that they have depression, they have anxiety, they have obsessive compulsive disorder. This is good. Like I'm glad that I know these things about them because it allows me to be more supportive, or at least not an asshole. Like, come on, man, let's go out. Come on. Like when someone goes, no, I'm having a rough night, you respect that. But I also think we might have kind of, we were talking about the second segment, right? We've sanded off all the hard edges here. What happens to a society when no one is expected to overcome anything?
Yeah, it's a good question. The big Gen X part of me is all about how, oh, there's this old Calvin and Hobbes cartoon where Calvin's marching around the house going, and he's talking in his dad's voice, and he says, Calvin, go do something you hate. It builds character, right? And a big part of me wants to just be like Calvin's dad, right? Go do something you hate, right? Builds character. On the other hand, it's these mental health challenges, and one of the things that I find really surprising with my students and other young people is how easily they talk about their mental health. Compared to like we just like I don't know, how are you? Fine, right? Like we just don't talk about mental health. In my
Yeah, you and I
generation
are
of kids,
standing in a room somewhere holding our severed limbs. How you
yeah,
doing? Good.
good, good.
We're good. Yeah.
And how is it easily? And I think it's incumbent on us. And this is something I've sort of taken me a while to come to take it at face value and try and meet them where they're at in their heads. It's the weird thing about mental health, right? Is it's like if it's all in your head, it's all in your head, right? It's still real, right? That's the whole problem with it. But we need to figure out strategies for getting people around all this. I mean, we can't, those numbers on those charts, they just can't keep diving, right? We can't become a whole bunch of, I mean, we can, but we don't want to become a society of people, people neurotics hold up with their phones, right? I mean, which is where things are trending. So what do we do about it? These are very good questions. I mean, I know Quebec has simply banned phones in schools.
Yeah. Ontario's done the same
Ontario's done the
on a
same thing.
graduated thing, like younger kids banned entirely, older kids only at lunch. And then by high school, you're allowed to have your device, I
Oh,
think.
really? It's just the opposite here. So my son's starting high school here in the fall. Well, in the fall in 2 weeks, right, or 3 weeks. I keep thinking it's in the fall, right? It's in 2 or 3 weeks, and they have to put their phones in a locker, hand them in. They're not allowed having their phones.
Huh.
And they're not allowed. They're not, according to legislation, they're not allowed on campus. I think they're creating these sort of like little safe zones and so on. And I think we need to be much more robustly supportive of these kind of initiatives and figure our ways around them. I mean, there's a lot of parents who are unhappy with it because they want to be able to text their kids in school, and the kids are unhappy with it. But there was a study. Where did I see it? It just came out this week. I'll try and we can put it in the link in the show notes or something like that. That they did a survey of students who had been denied use of phones in classrooms. And the impact on learning was statistically significant, but not huge.
Okay.
But the impact on students' understanding of or feelings about the classroom experience was very significant. That is, not only did they like the initiative, they supported it, it also made them open and to further steps, further mitigation strategies around technology. That it was a success by that standard. It made them sort of realize, oh, I could get off this drug, right? I'll try and find it because I think it was really important, and I meant to find it and didn't.
You talked a little bit about how there was a time when the online world and the offline world were distinct. I was in the trenches of that because I'm a few years younger than you, and the only reason I bring that up is I was in high school when like instant messaging and webcams and all those things were actually hitting like widespread adoption, and you probably just dodged that bullet by a couple of years. And at first, the instant messaging things were a way to coordinate social plans. Hey, do you want to meet at the park in 20 minutes? Like things like that. But then gradually over the years, it just replaced in-person socialization. Like right now, probably 95% of my social interaction is in various group chats. And every once in a while, almost kind of like residual habit will be like to the group chat, should we have dinner? Like, should we actually meet in person? And we make like weird monkey grunting noises at each other because we've lost all social skills. We just kind of point at each other like, you're actually here. You're squishy. But we talk every day. We just never see each other. And all my friends live within like 800 meters of me.
Right.
But we just don't get together.
Right.
And I'm thinking like I think it was an American author who was writing about this a few years ago, where he says what we've done is we've killed boredom.
Yeah.
If you're bored, you pick up your phone. If you're lonely, you pick up your phone. If you're anxious, you pick up your phone. And I don't hate technology. I use technology every day. You and I are recording a podcast which will be distributed at light speed to the entire free world, and you and I are 500 kilometers apart. I like technology, but I never have to be bored, lonely, or scared anymore.
Yep. Yeah, it's the great tragedy of our time, right? That nobody's bored. One of the I don't know if I would have managed to survive high school in the current media environment intact. One of the things I found out, so like I said, my son's he's 12. He was for a long time chatting with his friends on Facebook Messenger, like for kids, which we let them use and so on. And he stopped using it, and they'd switched over to Snap. And maybe all suspicious about Snap. Are they texting weird things to each other? I don't think there's any dick pics or anything like that going around, right? But they use Snap. But one of the things that Snap has, I didn't know this until my wife pointed it out. Snap has a location function associated with it.
Yeah.
So you know where everybody is, right? So you know if you're being left out, right? You know if all your friends are somewhere and you're not there, you know it, right? And I cannot begin to process how toxic that would have been and will be and is to insecure kids.
One of my kids has had a similar experience, and I don't know if it was Snapchat or not, but kind of what it's become is that like you get up in the morning and you open your phone and you see that 3 of your friends are out at Starbucks together taking selfies, and they didn't invite you.
He didn't invite you. Yeah. I have the sneaking suspicion and a great worry that on my deathbed or when I'm older, much older, kids are going to be writing novels like Mommy Dearest type books where they're going to be like, why did you let this happen to us? Why did you let us have social media accounts? Like, what were you thinking? Right.
I think you're right. But I think the easy answer to that is because there was a plague. My wife and I had a social media plan for our kids. My wife's a teacher. She teaches at the elementary school level. And in the last few years, she's been teaching very young kids. So kindergarten, grade 1, grade 2. So social media is not a huge issue for them, but she also had previously taught grade 7 and 8 and for years. And one of the things she had told me once was that when we were in school, if we were being bullied, it stopped at 3:30.
Right.
The bell would go, you'd go home and you'd be in a safe space. The bullying is just virtual now and it follows you. And we had a plan to introduce our kids very slowly and gradually to social media. But then COVID happened and their entire education and social life shifted to an iPad for 2 years. Yeah. And how do you undo that? How do you put that toothpaste back in the tube? Yeah,
it's very hard. It's very hard.
Well, on that cheerful note, you've got another meeting. So we have failed to solve the world's problems, but Andrew Potter of The Line and also of McGill, thanks for coming on. Appreciate it. You have filled in for Jen, and I appreciate your time. So it's an Ontario, Quebec podcast today, not Ontario and Alberta.
My pleasure. Good to see you, Matt.
Good to see you.
Okay. Take care, man.
Take care. Well, thanks for listening, folks. That was Andrew Potter of The Line, an author, a columnist, and as well a professor at McGill University, filling in for Jen Gerson, who is off this week, but I think she's back next week. I haven't asked yet. I probably should have. I'm a very conscientious co-host. Many thanks to all of you for listening. As always, check us out at readtheline.ca. Like and subscribe to us there. If you like the podcast, whatever you just listen to it on, hit the like and subscribe button. Actually sign up and you'll get updates. Visit us at our main website. Sign up for a free account there. You'll get notifications when we're publishing stuff. And do us a favor. If you like this, leave us a great review and tell a friend. Tell 10 friends. I mean, well, based on the last segment, you might only have 2 or 3. Tell however many friends you have about the Line podcast and our website. Readtheline.ca. We'll be back with you next week. Another episode of On the Line coming out on Tuesday, and that's already in the works. Have an amazing weekend. And yes, this weekend, we will do a dispatch. So look for that at readtheline.ca. Like and subscribe.